Hello and welcome back to Shreviews. I made my first video 3 years ago in February of 2019, and in there the first thing that I said was, I don't know what I'm doing. And that was true. I didn't know anything about the visual medium as I was a blogger and a writer. I used to write for websites. But when I made my first few videos, I remember getting the feedback and I was taken aback by how far people looked into the visual aspect of things. So things like, what's in my background? What's my facial expression? Do I look angry or sad or happy or excited? Do I look tired or energetic? Do I have a 5 o'clock shadow? Am I clean shaven? And of course, what I was wearing. As time went on, I started making some tweaks to this. I started changing the backdrop. I started looking into how to improve my facial expressions and my tone. And of course, I started changing my appearance. And while changing my appearance was the simplest of all the changes that I made, it helped me learn a lot about myself. You see, for the longest time, I insisted on a very basic, very simple, very regimented style of clothing. 1 or 2 colors, no patterns, no ornamentations, making no statements. That was just the way I preferred dressing for years and years, and I really didn't think about why I was so adamant on sitting between the fence of dressing to impress or dressing to express. So when I decided to wear a Hawaiian shirt on a work day, I expected it to be a little joke, a little reprieve for all my coworkers battling Zoom fatigue in the middle of a global pandemic. I thought they would laugh at me, call me silly, and move on with their day. Maybe they'd think I'm a weirdo. But they didn't laugh at me. I got smiles, I got nods of acknowledgement, I got the one-off compliment here and there. I was pleasantly surprised by all of that, but it raised an important question in my mind, and that was, why did I think they would laugh at me? I pondered over this question for a bit. I thought about my years of minimal dressing sense, my insistence on not making any statements using my clothing, cringing at colors and patterns. I also thought about how it felt wearing a colorful Hawaiian shirt instead of wearing a plain single color polo shirt. I was pleasantly surprised by how good it felt to have a pop of color in an otherwise dull and drab existence, so full of sameness, especially in the times we live in, confined to our homes. I had a breakthrough when I went back to my past. I looked at pictures of myself as a child, and of course I didn't buy my own clothes back then, but I saw I used to wear a lot more livelier, more colorful clothing. So then the question became, what happened between my childhood and teenage or young adult years that drastically changed my outlook towards how I presented myself? I had a breakthrough when I went back to my past. I looked at pictures of myself as a child. Of course, I didn't buy my own clothes back then, but I saw that I wore a lot more lively, a lot more colorful clothing. So the question then became, what happened between my childhood and my teenage or young adult years that drastically changed my outlook towards how I presented myself? After a lot of digging through my memories, I found my answer. When I was a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I decided to wear a blue beanie or monkey cap to school, or something like this. It had tassels hanging off the sides of it, and blue is my favorite color, so I wanted to keep my ears warm in the winter and wear this to school, so I decided to put it on. I mean, it was warm and it was cozy, and I was feeling pretty good about myself until about I walked to the bus stop. You see, kids can be cruel, and the other kids at the bus stop definitely decided to be extra cruel to me that winter morning when they all pointed and laughed at me in unison. I learned a lot about people and society that day. I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, and most importantly, I learned a lesson. That it was time to grow up. There was no more being childish, no more being silly, and that meant I had to look and act like a grown-up. And that meant I had to change how I presented myself. I had pushed this memory into a dark corner of my mind. I hadn't thought about it in many, many years. But I do believe that this event was the one that had so many far-reaching effects. It changed how I viewed myself, it changed how I viewed other people, This was a huge realization for me because it helped me understand that I was viewing all these experiences through a particular lens for so long. So many of my behaviors started to make sense. My aversion to being made fun of, taking so many things as a personal attack when people were trying to just critique me, staying under the radar, refusing to get into any conflicts or any confrontations. Also, my bad habit as a young adult of putting myself down as a precautionary measure so other people couldn't do it to me first. So what's the name of this lens, this concept that lies at the root of it all? The inner child. The simplest, most commonly known and yet most neglected of all things. This neglect is almost universal. It affects our lives even when we are adults. We ignore this inner child for as long as we can as we inhabit a cold and cruel world run by calculating adult minds. However, the inner child has a habit of making itself known, a habit of overpowering the will of even the most headstrong and stubborn of individuals. In my case, it was my seemingly unexplained defensiveness in the face of questioning and criticism. It was my aversion to getting into arguments and confrontations. And as I've mentioned earlier, it was my simplistic dressing sense that didn't make any statements, that wanted to recede into the background, that didn't want to get into any way of anybody. So how to move forward? How to deal with this? I started by looking at the incident itself and the lesson that I learned from it all those years ago. By inverting that, I realized that I was stifling my desires just to appease some invisible force. I thought about all the things that I had abandoned back in my childhood and all these years that I actually liked, but I had to give up due to pressures, trying to live up to these expectations. I thought about all the unnecessary weight I was carrying around, trying to live up to all of these standards. And yes, all these expectations that other people put on you are a burden, in my opinion. My whole life, there's a constant feeling of unmet potential. If only I was taller, if only I lost some weight, if only I was an extrovert, if only I was popular, if only I had many friends, if only I was at the top of my class in school and college, if only I was more successful by now, if only I had enjoyed my 20s some more, if only. My whole life, I've been trying to measure up to some ideal vision of a man and what a man is supposed to be. Whether it be a rich and successful professional with a penthouse suite in a big city with Scandinavian decor, whether it be a womanizing Casanova like James Bond or the other characters that they show on TV. Whatever it may be, I've fallen so far short every single time. Not famous enough, not rich enough, didn't have enough friends, didn't make enough memories as a youngster. All this tremendous weight of unmet expectations, the guilt of potential that I didn't live up to hanging over my head, wrapped around my neck. The way that I used to dress for so long was just emblematic of the greater problem of trying to live up to these warped ideals that I thought I was supposed to live up to because that's success, that's happiness, that's acknowledgement from other people. That's when I will finally deserve the things that I have in my life, all while ignoring that which I really wanted. This relentless desire to be accepted, be acknowledged by the outside world, to have the admiration and the praise, at least to avoid being made fun of. In all of this, I ignored this wounded, hurt, helpless part of my psyche, hoping that it would just go away, recede into nothingness, hoping that I would find a way to overpower this inner child once and for all. I think back to a journal entry that I wrote in my journal in many years ago, in January of 2018. I wrote, I keep looking outside of myself, because when I look inside, there's just this absolute child. That's why I have this air of seriousness, because when I try to be sincere instead, there's just an absolute child. This whole time I'm trying to suppress my inner child, but now I've decided to go the other way. I've decided to acknowledge and heal this part of myself that I've been ignoring for so long. I'm trying to express myself in ways that I've not expressed myself before, because I was afraid of being made fun of, because I was afraid of being criticized. Changing what I wear is just the start. And I hope this video helps you all embrace your own inner children instead of trying to escape them or trying to run away from them. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, don't try to kill the part of yourself that you find cringeworthy. Try to kill the part of yourself that cringes. I'll see you next time.